Both Miami and Dallas were playing on the second night of a back-to-back set, but only one team had superstars Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who combined for 54 points, while Miami's two best players, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, combined for just 20. That was the difference in the game as the Heat look forward to the playoffs, but are still struggling to find out who they really are. We break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucaneat.com. Joining me as always, credentialed Heat media member David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Recording this on Wednesday night from Kaseya Center after the Heat lost to the Mavericks 111-92. The good news is we found a couch. The bad news is Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo combined for 20 points, while Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving combined for 54 points in what amounted to a blowout. That's basically the game right there, David.
Yeah, Miami started off with a nice sense of energy. They were hitting some shots. It looked like maybe, despite the fact that they were coming in from a tough double overtime win in Atlanta, that maybe they might still be engaged for this game. Luka Doncic got into early foul trouble, picked up 3 early fouls, and it looked like that might be a difference maker for Miami. Not so much, because when Luka came out, Dallas was actually able to extend their lead. They were able to get incredible contributions from Kyrie Irving, Maxi Kleber, P.J. Washington. There was a number of players. Daniel Gafford as a starter did a really good job of limiting Bam Adebayo. And from that point forward, it was basically their game. I don't know how large their lead was, because at some point, I think a lot of people were just exasperated with seeing yet another huge lead from Miami to have to overcome. But overcome they did. They wound up getting it to 8 points midway through the fourth quarter, and there was a sense that maybe they might mount a close comeback. Unfortunately, from that point forward, Dallas went off on a 17-6 run to close the game, and that was really what put the Heat to bed finally once and for all.
Yeah, Tyler Hero did his best to try to will this team back into it. The Heat made their run. You mentioned the largest lead. Dallas led by as many as 25 points in this game, and it was 20 points for most of the second quarter, third quarter. Miami would make a little run here. Dallas would pull away there. And then Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo went to the bench, and it was Tyler Hero and Kevin Love who kind of willed this team back into it. They cut the lead to 8 points, and you're looking around, and I'm like, leave them in there?
Yeah.
And the Mavericks end up calling a timeout. The Heat come out of the timeout. Tyler Hero's on the bench because he had at that point played 33 minutes, and there was about 7.5 minutes left in the game. So Spoelstra obviously trying to get this guy a breather on the second night of a back-to-back after he played 40-plus minutes in that double overtime game, 48 minutes or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And let's remember, he's also coming back from knee and foot injuries here. So obviously that you needed to be a little cautious with him. And so Spo out of that Dallas timeout puts Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo back in. And maybe some would criticize him for benching Hero and Kevin Love in that moment. My argument would be you should be able to at least maintain the 8-point deficit or at least cut more into it when your two best players are on the floor in Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Tyler Hero did his job. Kevin Love did his job getting the team back into the game. And it just felt like all night Jimmy Butler never did his job. Yep. Bam Adebayo never did his job. Luka Doncic did his job. Kyrie Irving did his. And there's only so much that you can ask of Tyler Hero and Kevin Love and Caleb Martin and these guys to do when the two stars on the other end are doing their job. They're playing like stars. And they're still, by the way, getting 12 points from all the other role players in the starting lineup. Haywood Highsmith can do whatever he wants. Caleb Martin can do whatever he wants. Kevin Love can do whatever he wants. But when push comes to shove, at the end of the day, you just need your stars to go toe-to-toe with the other stars. The Heat had no stars tonight other than Tyler Hero.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, not to counter the point too much, I think Dallas had wound up building their lead back up to 13 after that initial break where it was 8s.
Yeah.
And then they wound up making a little bit of a run, perhaps leaving Kevin and Tyler in just a smidge too long. But considering what you just said, it was probably the right decision. We were talking about amongst media members on Media Row, and I thought, you know what? They're the guys that brung you here. You got to leave them in there. It wound up proving somewhat costly because at that point, Dallas wound up extending their lead to, like I said, 13 or 14. But it didn't really matter because once Jimmy and Bam came in there, as you pointed out, the stars that should be able to at least cut into that lead or maybe at least hold it to 14. No, from there they even wound up building even more of a lead. So it was just a bad game for Jimmy and Bam. And after the game, Eric Spoelstra, after a really long break in between the end of the game and appearing before media, you wonder whether or not there was some kind of a discussion or meeting or anything like that. This is just my theory here. I'm not sure exactly what might have taken place. He comes out and he basically says, Jimmy, just didn't have it, and Bam, has been countered. They've figured out a way of limiting and making things more difficult for him. But there were just there were several moments throughout the game there where both of them made what was just head-scratching bad plays, and it's rather unfortunate because you do look to them to kind of set the tone for this team as they have so frequently over the last few years, and that just wasn't the case today. They set the tone in a really bad way because they were not difference makers. In fact, if anything, they were difference makers in Dallas's favor because they were just playing so badly. To combine for 20 points, that's kind of inexcusable. I don't know what else to make of it.
Not kind of. It is. I mean, look, I know that the team is basically out of the play-in tournament, and that in the grand scheme of things, this game didn't matter. But you're trying to ramp up to the playoffs, and Eric Spoelstra said this after the game. He doesn't care about the standings right now because they are just what they are. The only difference is whether or not they're going to be the 7th seed or the 8th seed going into the 7-8 play-in game. But they're going to be in the play-in game. And but he made the point. It's like the standings don't matter. It's how we're playing going into the playoffs. Sure. And if you're playing like this, the playoffs are not going to last very long for the Heat. Point. And Jimmy Butler had 5 turnovers in this game. He had 8 shot attempts the entire night.
I've been curious. I wanted to ask you, have we seen the jump passes from him more often this season? Because it feels like he's just
whole.
Yeah, because it feels like he's dribbling into nothingness. Like he doesn't know what to do, which is so atypical for him. He's not getting those foul calls. He can't finish at the rim at the higher level that he did previously to this year. And now I feel like over the last few weeks, it's been a lot of dribble, go baseline, try to curl around, find an opening, try to find something at the rim, and can't. And then he winds up just making a jump pass that winds up leading to a turnover. I think we saw this with Dwayne when he was older as well. Like you just get to that point where you can't necessarily make the right choice. You get caught in the air because you can't do what you once were able to do, pull up for that jumper, get to the rim, etc.
Or dunk. He missed a clean dunk attempt.
They both did. Man missed bunnies. Like we don't want to harp on them necessarily, but
I do.
They were the
difference. They were the reason they lost the game.
They were the difference.
And they're going to be the reason why the Heat don't go very far in the postseason.
Or go very far if they can flip the switch.
Sure, but we've been waiting for it all year, and it's just not happening. To your point, I think there is something to say about the jump pass because the jump pass is a timing thing, right? It's I got to get a certain amount of air on my jump so that I can look over the defense and then pass it to where I need to pass it. And Jimmy Butler has been very good at the jump pass throughout his career. And if he's getting a little bit less lift on that jump pass, then all of a sudden he starts finding himself sort of in the thick of the trees and never really poking his head out of the canopy.
Yeah.
And it leads to a turnover. Can I give you one more troubling stat for Jimmy Butler? 0 free throw attempts.
Yeah, that was weird.
And this was not an officiating thing.
No, I don't think so.
He wasn't
either.
aggressive even a little bit. I thought, Bam got to the line. He had 2 free throw attempts. It wasn't a lot. He at least took 13 shots. He missed 10 of them. I don't know. I just don't know that switch is going to be flipped because I don't know if Jimmy is capable of it anymore. And it's games like this where you'd say, you're going head-to-head with Luka, a guy who's getting legitimate MVP buzz. You're going head-to-head with Kyrie Irving, one of the most respected players across the NBA. Like, you can't bring your A game like that.
That would have been the case years ago.
It would have. And
maybe even last year.
It would have been the case last year. We have seen Jimmy Butler pick and choose his spots. And it feels like this season, he's not picking and choosing the spots against the top competition. He's just flat out losing those matchups. We had a question on Twitter about when was the last time Bam and Jimmy combined for 50 points? The answer is March 2nd. They combined for 60 points. Since then, they haven't even gotten close to 50 points. That's weird. It doesn't take much to get to. It's 25 points apiece, right? Like, there are players on teams averaging that.
Yeah.
Like together. So it's I don't know what to make of this. I just know that like Bam Adebayo is obviously going through a slump right now, but this isn't like maybe it's a little bit of wear and tear, but like big picture, I'm not worried about Bam. Like he's young, he'll be fine. Jimmy, that's the concerning part here. That's really, to me, the concerning part here.
I don't want to go into that right now because, again, as we've said for weeks leading into this, like obviously as disposed point to, I think, the frustration of a lot of fans, you want to be playing good basketball as you're approaching the playoffs. That seems like that's unlikely to happen. And the hope is the playoffs are going to start and then we'll see something different from this team. But there's the flip side of that, which is what if there's nothing left? What if they can't flip that switch? And so I think it's something to at least prepare for if you're a Heat fan.
It's a fair question to ask.
Yeah, not with any kind of sense of doom or gloom. That's for the offseason, however long that might last. And I think right now you just kind of have to hope that Jimmy gets some time to recover, that Bam gets some time to recover, and hopefully that they'll be in better shape.
So we do have some questions about the doom and gloom offseason. We also have questions about time to recover. We'll get to all that later on. But first, do the Heat have an even bigger problem when it comes to their star duo? We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? If you ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner, our friends over at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is a great car, a perfect combination of city drives and great adventurous escapes. Wherever you're looking to go, the Rogue will get you there in style. They've got their 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. But if you're looking for something a little different, maybe even a little bigger, you got the Pathfinder with room of up to 8 and expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. You can also try the Nissan Armada. It will change what you expect from a full-size SUV, a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. So take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Go shop nissanusa.com.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all this screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube with the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I teased the idea that maybe the Heat have a bigger problem when it comes to their all-star duo as we went into that ad break, David, and here's what I mean by it. The Heat have consistently, and I mean Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo consistently have not played up to the par of their superstar competition recently. You think about what they did against the Knicks and Jalen Brunson, what they did even against the Pacers with Halliburton and Siakam. It just seems more and more that Miami's two best players aren't playing as well as their opponent's two best players. And it's not impossible to win games that way, but it sure does make it a lot more difficult to win games that way. And so when I think about where the Heat's all-star duo ranks in the Eastern Conference, I think there's a conversation to be had here. So here's what I want to do. Stop me. I'm going to list off the top duos in the East. Right. Stop me when you think Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo have been materially better than these
during this regular season.
Yeah, right now, as we're talking right now.
Fair.
Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You're not stopping me. Giannis and Damian Lillard. As much as the Milwaukee has struggled, they're still better. Joel Embiid, now healthy. Tyrese Maxey, now healthy. Okay, not stopping me. Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam.
You can make a case, maybe.
Okay, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. That's kind of where I'm starting to think about things, too. The Knicks, Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, when he's healthy. I don't know.
When he's healthy?
Would you put Randle and Brunson? And maybe it's OG Anunoby at this point. Maybe it's Dante DiVincenzo.
See, but that's another case, though, where you don't have two superstars, but at the very least, you've got Brunson playing at an MVP level.
Yeah.
And that's the difference maker, is that neither Bam nor Jimmy is capable of putting up the kind of level of production. That's not the way this team is built. It's an egalitarian offense. It's whoever's got the hot hand going. We've seen Duncan put up big games. We've seen Tyler recently putting up big games when he's back.
Is it not built that way, or are they just playing that way because they have to? Because I would argue that there is a very clear, like, when Jimmy Butler plays like that guy, it does feel like it's built that way.
We made this case last week when we had Jeremy Teshea on the show. Like, the
that
idea.
Was this week?
That was last week.
That was last week?
Yeah. Wasn't it?
Wait.
Yeah, it was last week. I think we were talking about the watch party. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is that we had.
That was this week.
You know what time is a construct anyway. The idea is that the Heat can do just enough or get enough production from other players across the board so that Jimmy can carry the team in a series. But we've seen this even since 2019 when he joined Miami. You had Goran Dragic being the team's best player. You had Bam Adebayo being the team's best player. Last year it was Caleb Martin. You had other players stepping up on different occasions. And yes, you still had Jimmy capable of reaching great heights, and that might still be the case. I agree with your point.
I mean, I think Jimmy, the two-way play, the lacking of the turnovers, like that was all the stuff. Like I still think that even when he wasn't the highest scorer on some of those teams, he was still the team's best player. And there's going to be nights throughout the regular season where even Jalen Brunson is outscored by Dante DiVincenzo. Like that's just going to happen. So, but there is a point where you just need your stars to carry you more often than not. And more often than not this season, compared to past seasons,
he has not.
Jimmy's not been that guy. I got a few more for you. It gets a little, like, we can kind of mix and match the star duos in the order. But Cleveland's got, like, Donovan Mitchell and who's their second best player? Jared Allen?
Yeah.
Better than Jimmy and Bam?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
So far. Trae Young and DeJounte Murray?
No.
They don't play well together. But.
No. Well, I guess from a production standpoint, but ultimately, look, I get the exercise.
Ben Caro and Wagner.
I get it. I mean,
no, we've been past the point. I think Butler and Bam are better than a lot of those duos, but they're not. But they're not up to the level of the top ones in the Eastern Conference. And when you look, I mean, we decipher this game so much, and the whole next man up thing, and and the developmental projects. But you look at the top of the East, and you look at the standings, and it's the teams with the best players at the top, the best players playing their best. They're the ones at the top. Right? You mentioned Jalen Brunson and the Knicks. Like they're going to end up being the three seed in the Eastern Conference probably. That's because Jalen Brunson's one of the top five scorer in the NBA per game.
That's why they pursued Dame Lillard in the offseason. He was supposed to be the person who carried the brunt of the offensive load. Perhaps plan, I don't know, 2Z is Tyler Hero being the guy who carries the scoring load, but he just doesn't get nearly enough the opportunity. And on top of that, he's missed 20 games over recently. So I think that was the idea, was that you were going to have Tyler lead the team in scoring, which would facilitate Jimmy and Bam sliding into being able to do all the little dirty work, things that they specialize and have specialized in over the course of
Tyler,
the
guy that you're going to trade Tyler for. And I do think, I get accused of being a Tyler Hero apologist, and I'll happily wear that hat. I'm fine with it. I think he's got all the talent in the world. I also know that he's 23, 24, during these seasons where you've been asking him to do this stuff, and I don't think that that's necessarily fair for a guy who's still very much on the upswing of his developmental curve, right? And that's why you try to trade him for Kevin Durant or Donovan Mitchell or Damian Lillard. But I'm watching this game, and I can't help but think, should they at least have called Brooklyn about Kyrie Irving? Should they at least have called Philadelphia about James Harden? Because this is, like, you look at what Dallas is putting together, and they were aggressive. And a lot of people panned the Kyrie Irving deal. A lot of people panned their trade deadline deals for Gafford and P.J. Washington, but they got dudes who can put up.
They're working out.
They got dudes who could score. They figured it out. They were aggressive because they had a guy who's capable of winning a championship right now, and Luka Doncic. He could be the best guy on a championship-winning team. There's no doubt about it. Jimmy Butler over the last 4 years has also been capable of being the best guy on a championship team. We'll see if he's still capable of reaching those heights in the postseason if the Heat make it that far to the point where we get to 7-game series. But it just feels like maybe they missed the boat on it, where they weren't aggressive enough in trying to find that guy. Where, yeah, of course Kevin Durant is a no-brainer. Of course Damian Lillard at the time felt like a no-brainer. But like guys who weren't necessarily a no-brainer but might have been more of a home run swing like Harden and Kyrie, should they have been more aggressive trying to get those guys?
I'm going to put a pause on that conversation, at least from my perspective. I mean, there are valid questions that we can ask. I just think that we still have to reserve judgment until after we see what Jimmy does in the playoffs. And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's not fair because there are plenty of frustrations that lead up to this point. But the expectation is that if Jimmy can be that player in the postseason, then perhaps it doesn't matter.
Maybe he'll get traded in the offseason. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Oh, boy. What a tease. All right. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA, maybe, and NHL, and baseball's in full swing. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every game right
NHL
now.
Playoffs?
What's that?
The NHL playoffs are happening?
Soon.
Oh.
They're around the same time as the NBA
what I
playoffs.
thought.
Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We'll be right back.
See, the Panthers made an aggressive deal. They went and made a franchise-altering trade when they went and got Kachuk. Sure. And look at them. They've got the second highest point differential in the NHL right now. They have the tied for the best record in their conference. Like, that's how you do it. You know? All right. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. You can reach us, lockedonheat@gmail.com, lockedonheat on Instagram. This question comes from Brian, and I love this question. Should Miami just sit guys for the 2 Raptors games? Just accept the 8th seed, have guys rested, avoid injury before Tuesday's game? David, I brought this point up a couple of games ago.
Yeah.
I think after this loss, based on what Jimmy looked like and based on what Bam looked like, and I don't know if rest will help. I don't know if Jimmy's just reached a point in his career where it doesn't matter, but I know that you can't just keep doing this either. So I'm rest them.
If the question
Jamal
is,
Cain marathon, let's go.
If the question is, should they? The answer is yes. But will they? The answer is no. We already know that based on Spo's answer post game.
I think it's a fair point
To suggest what? That they should?
that they not like if the standings don't matter, then okay. Like hopefully Terry Rozier comes back from this neck thing. Duncan Robinson, maybe you could put his back injury behind him and he can come back or whatever. But you could get into a flow. Maybe would be the argument against resting your guys would be to create some momentum going into the playoffs. And I hear that, and I think it's a good point, and you're absolutely right. There's zero chance that the Heat rest their guys. Maybe the last game, but not Friday night. They're not going to rest them. If you can get a strong win on Friday night at home against the Raptors that you can feel good about, then maybe you just like end it there.
That I will balk at that because you know what?
They did it last year.
Yeah, no doubt. There's no chance that you're going to build any kind of momentum over 2 games. I don't give a damn. Like at this point, like you've had players in and out. You're never going to.
That's a good point.
You're not going to build enough consistency. The next play-in game, whenever that might be, if Miami is wind up, it's less
Tuesday
than a week
or
away.
Wednesday.
Less than a week away from where we are right now. You're not going to build any kind of goddamn consistency after starting your 38th freaking starting lineup. Like there's no way that you're going to build anything at this point in time. So you just kind of rest him. Hope for the best. Give him a break. Let him go catch a movie or something. I don't know.
What movie?
I don't know. I don't even know what's out there.
I just watched the new Roadhouse. But that's just like on Amazon Prime. You don't even have to like go to the theater.
Yeah.
So but that's nice. Like that's even better rest. Just stay home. You don't even have to go to the movie theater.
Yeah,
It's a lot of rest.
Yeah, maybe you can have like a team party or something. Spo needs to cut loose a little bit.
If anything, it'd be a little bit
I don't know.
motivational. Jake Gyllenhaal fighting Conor McGregor. Like, just like, yeah, bring that energy to a basketball game instead of like whatever the opposite of Roadhouse is.
How was it?
It was fun.
It's not as good as the classic.
Of course not. But it was just like, okay, let's just like have fun with the Roadhouse name, and it was just Jake Gyllenhaal and Conor McGregor fighting each other.
There you go.
One of them dies at the end.
I'm gonna go on a limb and say it's not Jake Gyllenhaal. Oh, you just ruined it. Spoilers alert. There you go.
Thomas writes in, the problems come straight from the top. The Jimmy/Bam combo no longer works, and they aren't working as a duo. Is it at the point now that if we flame out, then one of those two has to go?
Well, that's a huge topic there. I will say that it's probably an option, but I think there's a lot of nuance interwoven in there. One, Jimmy's age, Jimmy's contract. 2, Bam and his ceiling, regardless of whether or not he has no ceiling or not. So to me, I think, yes, you certainly entertain the option, but I don't know that we can entertain it right now in terms of what they do during the offseason. I think there's going to be changes. We've talked about this ad nauseum. There will be changes this offseason, regardless of the outcome. And you have to make changes because you've reached a finite point. You cannot keep this team together with the expectation that, one, you're not going to perform during the regular season, and that maybe you can flip that switch during the postseason. It's just not going to work that way as Jimmy continues to age. So, yes, there will be changes.
There's a finite list of guys that you would trade Bam for at this point. What he means to the franchise, he's the team captain, what he represents, the tone that he sets. Yes, exactly. There is a list of guys, and those are guys in the MVP conversation. And I think that's it. I like the guys that are perennially in the MVP conversation. Like, those are the guys that I think you would have to, that the Heat would at least hypothetically think of. But we also know that it's not like Denver's not trading Nikola Jokic for Bam Adebayo. Like, these trades, in other words, the trades that won't happen are the only trades that the Heat would ever entertain.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I would be very surprised.
Understand that, especially on a night where Bam only scored 8 points. That might not be a point where kind of breaking over here right now. But that's
I think maybe it's a great time to bring it up. It's just as a reminder. And like I said, Bam's having a few off nights. He's worn down by the load that's been put on him because, in part, Jimmy Butler hasn't been picking up that part.
Is he playing to that threshold of 65 games? Was he playing for
Bam's
something?
I don't think so. I think that they other than this game, they've been trying to get out of the play-in tournament, and he's been trying to get a week off.
He needs time.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, going back to the last question, maybe you just rest him against these Raptors games. But yeah, Bam's not. I would be very, very surprised if Bam got traded. Is how I'm going to answer that question. Professor X writes in. I know you don't want. These are the questions we're getting, David. I'm sorry.
No, they're just dire at this point. I think there's a lot
of. Who do we believe gets traded in the upcoming rebuild? Do we do right by Jimmy and trade him to an actual contender? Okay, so now we're just doing the hypothetical if the Heat were to put Jimmy Butler on the market. And that's not us saying that they are going to. That's not us predicting anything. We got the question. If you did put Jimmy Butler on the trade market, would you do right by him and trade him to an actual contender?
No, I don't think so. I think you do what you have to in order to build a franchise. Like, I know you're going to take a loss in terms of PR and the player that has defined the franchise for the last 5 years, but you have to find a way of getting the most possible. You've committed time, you've committed money. It didn't turn out to be a title window, unfortunately, or it closed before it could become consummated as a championship. But I think you have to do what's possible. This isn't Dwayne Wade in 2016. This isn't Dame Lillard after 12 seasons in Portland. I mean, I don't want to say that Jimmy was a mercenary, but I mean, he's played for a number of teams before. This is his 4th team, and he's been here for 5 seasons. If it doesn't work out and you wind up having to explore a trade, you do whatever the hell you have to in order to get the trade that makes this team the best possible. Whether it's a contender or not, that's a whole other issue. That's depending on who wants to acquire a 34-year-old who's going to be paid $60 million and might play in 50 regular season games. So that's another concern.
You're exactly right. If Jimmy Butler were maybe 2 or 3 years younger,
that's different.
The extension not looming.
Yeah.
Then you might have your pick of the litter, right? And you could actually send him to a contender. But if you were to trade Jimmy Butler right now, and this sounds crazy, but it's like, how many teams are out there looking for somebody like Jimmy Butler right now? Like, I don't know that there's a ton of teams.
You could have argued that Dame Lillard was a better player than Jimmy Butler at the end of last season, right? You could have made the argument, or within the same realm.
And even when Dame was on the market, like, that's why I took it was Miami and Milwaukee, and only Milwaukee until they talked themselves into it.
Right.
Like, Milwaukee was not a suitor in the beginning of the process. Toronto was kind of going back and forth about whether or not they wanted to do it, and ultimately decided that they didn't want to go all in for Damian Lillard. So when it just comes to aging superstars with big contracts, there's just a limited amount of teams, especially in today's environment, cap environment, where with the tax apron and how punitive it is. There's just not a lot of teams out there looking for that kind of player, regardless of how good that player may or may not be. So, I don't think that the Heat would have the luxury of sending him to a contender, although if they were able to send him to a contender and get the return that they would want, sure, they would probably do it. But if it was Houston that was just like, we want him, or whatever team, then they'd be like, all right, cool. Like, that's the offer on the table. And if, again, in this hypothetical scenario, they're motivated to trade Jimmy Butler, then maybe they would just do that.
Let's hope we don't have to have this conversation much longer. Like, I realize there's a few days away before the play-in tournament starts. All I hope is that Miami – I hope that our fans and fans of listening to the show understand that we're trying to give as many perspectives as possible here. And yet there's still optimism that this team can turn things around. It might seem dire right now, and I'll be honest with you. I mean, I've made points. You've made points. There's not a lot of hope, perhaps, but you have to hang on to some belief that maybe they can flip the switch and figure something out. And we'll see how it plays out.
One last question for you. I actually
Let's
like
do
this one. It has something to do with the game, but it's a hypothetical, and you know how I love hypotheticals.
Absolutely.
The Jim Reaper writes in, do you think if Jimmy and Bam had the supporting cast of Dallas that we would be improved or worse?
Improved?
Well, let's lay it out first. He's laying out better or worse. Jimmy Butler and Bam plus... so the supporting cast would be not Luka, not Kyrie,
sure.
right?
No, yeah,
that's how we're defining this.
Yes.
So it would be with Derrick Jones Jr., Josh Green, Dante Exum, PJ Washington, like Daniel Gafford coming off the bench, I suppose.
Absolutely not.
Derek Lively. Yeah, I don't think so.
Not at all. Like Tyler Hero.
Where's the upgrade there?
Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier are better than I think any of the other players available there. Like Daniel Gafford fits because of the straw that stirs the drink. They've got the superstars that produce offensively at a high level, and that allows everybody else to fit their role. The hierarchy is established in that sense.
Where would Dallas be in the West if you gave Luka and Kyrie the Heat supporting cast? So not Jimmy, not Bam.
First seed.
It would be them in Denver at the top, right? It would be...
Absolutely.
I mean, what would that lineup be? It would be those two...
Well, you would take out... Okay, so they wouldn't have a center, which is part of the
problem.
No,
they would have Gafford. They would have Gafford still. They wouldn't get Bam. So they would have Gafford, probably still P.J. Washington.
Thomas Bryant would look like an all-star playing next to Luka Doncic.
Orlando Robinson might look like an all-star playing next to Luka Doncic.
That's a good point.
Caleb Martin would be great for Dallas, but don't get any ideas. All right. That'll do it for us today on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app.